I have news. It is not over. In fact, it may not even have begun. I have reports tonight from very credible inside sources. When I say inside, I mean really inside BP, inside the U.S. government, that surface ships using GPS and depth finders have recorded in the last month the emergence of a bubble under the Gulf of Mexico floor, something between 15 and 20 miles across.
This is serious.
And tens of feet high. Now, this is preliminary because that measurement, as you know, GPS is degraded for civilian use, so we don't have access to the highest possible resolution of GPS data from the military side, or if it exists, they're not telling us. But this creation of a bubble around the wellhead, the Deepwater Horizon's, BOP sitting on the ocean floor.
Is this a gas bubble?
This would be a gas bubble. Now, let me go through the physics of what's going on. They started early this year drilling this well. Several geologists, one in particular who became president of one of the companies that basically runs around the world and puts out well catastrophes.
Okay.
In fact, this individual who you should have on the show, and I have made preliminary steps in moving in that direction, and he has agreed under certain conditions to be a guest. This is the guy who was in charge of putting out all the well fires in Kuwait. Remember how they were saying it would take 10 years?
He's like a Red Adair, right?
He's better than Red Adair. So he's got a proven track record. Anyway, he was writing documents and reports scathingly critical of the idea of doing exactly the kind of deep water drilling the BP did, because there are no safety precautions at those depths. Because if something bad goes really, really wrong, then the water will take it everywhere in the world if you can't turn it off. It's like, remember Fantasia?
Yeah.
Where Mickey Mouse couldn't stop
it just
the
kept
bubble
coming,
machine?
more and more.
It goes more and more and more. Well, this guy, this geologist, whose name I won't use at the moment, but I will privately tell you who and how to get hold of him and all that, he wrote documents years ago, a couple of years ago, saying that what they were planning to do was nuts because the formations, which is the technical term for the geology under the Gulf, probably could not safely withstand the pressures from opening up a deep, deep well. They went down 22,500 feet for this well. That's miles.
Unbelievable.
At those depths, the pressures are, get this, write this down, something like on the order of 100,000 pounds per square inch.
It's 4.5 miles deep.
Exactly. You cannot contain with current engineering pressures.
Could you also not sink if you go right over a bubble like that?
Well, exactly. You would, if a bubble came up, which is what I'm going to get to, you would sink every rig and every ship in the region for miles around this wellhead.
Which was a possibility for the Bermuda Triangle when
Precisely.
They talked about ships. Yeah,
exactly. There are occasions where we think ships have encountered hydrates that went to gas,
and they just disappear.
And because the water no longer has the same buoyancy, and so the ship founders and sinks.
Yeah.
And everybody dies because you can't swim in that either.
You just go down instantly.
You go down and you die, and so we're looking at potentially thousands of people on all those ships and those rigs that are now trying to solve this by drilling two wells, which, by the way, is also exactly the wrong thing to do. Here's the worst-case scenario. As that well, gushing up at that enormous pressure reaches the top, all the way up through we don't know how many layers of geology through 4.5 miles. It could be as many as 50 or 60 different layers of limestone, sand lenses, gas pockets, oil pockets, different oil reservoirs, which they went down through on the way down.
All pouring into this.
All being pressurized by this 100,000 PSI infinite fountain at the base, at the bottom of this reservoir. This is like turning on the bubble machine. Think Lawrence Welk and having no way to turn it off. That's why, by the way, they have not capped the well.
And I got to tell you, if you believe in the abiotic oil theory, like I do, it may never run out.
Well, there is another guy I want you to have on as a guest. His name is Chris Landau, Landau. He has delivered 2 peer-reviewed papers in the last year, one in 2008, one in 2009, on how abiotic oil could be processed and produced right now in this well-stacked series of formations, and no one is telling us whether they're looking at new oil or old oil, and there's a way to tell. So I need to get you that contact info so you can have him on, because he's a heavy hitter, and he was, again, one of the few ahead of the pack predicting things like this could happen before they occurred. Well, let me go back to the worst-case scenario. If this well, as it's pressurizing these upper-level strata, were to create cracks in the ocean floor at the top level, which appears to be happening if we listen to Senator Nelson.
That's right.
And we listen to the NOAA guys on the underwater plume.
Little fissures out there.
Fissures, yes. And they try to cap this well, or the final rupture occurs, you could have the most horrendous gas explosion 50 miles off Louisiana that you can imagine. Think Mount St. Helens underwater.
Underwater.
What that would do is create a cloud of incredible toxic material, which would then drift with the winds over the shore, where there are millions of people.
What about a tsunami?
The next step is you would get a tsunami, moving at between 400 to 600 miles an hour, all across in an expanding ring out from where this event occurred, and the most vulnerable state for that to occur, because nothing is more than 6 inches high, is Florida. It isn't Louisiana. It isn't Mississippi or Alabama. It's Florida. Now, we need something called the mud dog data or the mud log data.
What is that?
Every well that's drilled, drilling is a messy process. You got to send a mechanical drill spinning down, crunching through level after level after level to get to the depth where the oil is. They keep a record, a physical archive of the rocks, the material, the other oil samples. Every foot down is recorded, but it's proprietary. And the only people who have looked at the mud dog data, as it's called, by the riggers on these rigs, is BP. So what I want the Coast audience to do tonight is to send an email to Barack Obama and tell him that nothing makes any sense if we are only looking at the beginning of the catastrophe and not the cleanup. And to know this, we need independent geologists, both in government and outside of government, with access to this mud log data or mud dog data. And it needs to be not just from this well, but from all the other wells in the Gulf. There's 40,000 wells, George, and each one of those wells has a mud log, which will tell us the strata, the strength, what's in it, the age. In other words, you've got a CAT scan of the entire bottom of the Gulf. So if we're building toward a crisis, this will tell us if, in fact, people are going to have to leave the Gulf Coast to protect themselves and their families with enough warning. Now, it's not going to happen tomorrow. We've got weeks and maybe...
The introduction of powerful anti-submarine nuclear weapons into the Navy's arsenal posed some critical problems. What are the safe standoff distances for various types of vessels operating in the vicinity of subsurface nuclear weapon detonations? And what are the kill ranges for various types of ships? The underwater pressure and shock results were closely tied in with the ship hull and machinery loading and response studies. There was no hull damage to the target destroyers on either shot. On the deepwater Wahoo shot, the rounded spray dome rose to 900 feet. Shoaling water and coral heads broke the wave up and made inundation of nearby islands negligible. The 2 underwater shots on Operation Hardtack extended our knowledge of nuclear underwater blast, shock, and radiation effects. A great deal of information was gained, which upon completion of analysis will help to provide answers to naval tactical problems.